it's time to start talking about the different components in greater detail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each one of those components, and I'm going to go through websites for three companies really, all Windows machines. Once again, we'll look at Dell, HP, and Lenovo, and we're going to start looking at specifications, and I'll share with you what I see there and how I make decisions. So the first a comment, I made it before, I'm going to make it again. Well, the first comment is I'm sharing how I make those decisions. But the second comment is it is important that you don't overkill in one component and underperform in another component, because the strength of the power of your computer is going to depend typically on the weakest link. So you can have a very powerful laptop, a very powerful CPU with not enough memory to support it, or a lot of memory with not a very powerful CPU that can make use of it. So we're going to start. The first component I'm going to talk about is actually the CPU itself. And as I said, we're going to start looking at three manufacturers, computer manufacturers. I'm going to take the full screen. And the first one I happen to open on Dell. So we're going to look at a computer. We're going to look at laptops. They typically separate for home and for business. And what I found is that you typically get a better deal on something that is aimed for home rather than for business. So I'm going to take one. They popped on the right. They wanted to help me. And they have different versions, different types of laptops. And since I'm going to look again for this time for a video editing laptop, we're going to do laptop here. I'm going to look at the G series, which is similar to what I currently have. So you can see that they help you decide what you want to get, and before giving you everything that they have, because I'm sure that they have quite a few computers, I'm going to say processor. I want to have an Intel Core i7, and as soon as I do that, now we already started limiting things, and by limiting it, it actually lets us take a look at what they're offering. So they have Intel Cores i5, 7, 9. Or AMD Ryzen 5 and 7. So AMD is another processor company, and there are people who would only buy AMD. There are people who would only buy Intel. It used to be, I'm not 100% sure it still is the case, that you can get, for the same performance, you may end up paying a little more for Intel. For the most part, I bought Intel processors. Just recently, I bought one of my daughters for college, a laptop very similar to the other one, to the other daughter, but this one is with an AMD processor, and I don't think that any of them is complaining. These are not the generations. These are kind of, I'll call it the complexity of the processor. And so an i3, for a G series, the gaming series, or video editing, in my case, there is no i3. i3 is just not powerful enough for a video computer or a graphic or a gaming computer. So there's i5 minimum, i7, i9, and if you remember, I think it was DCS that said don't get anything less than an i5. i5 is the absolute minimum. So we're going to take a look at one of them, and let's take a look at, let's take a look at the one that I was looking at before. This is the one. And what you can see is that it has an Intel Core i7, but they already specified this as a 10th generation. As the generations of processors evolve, the processors can give you more performance for lower power, and typically even for less money. And this is simply because of the semiconductor, the silicon process that's getting smaller and smaller and gives you more performance, smaller size, lower power consumption. So if we clicked on that laptop, and we're going to take a look in greater detail, you can see it's a 10th generation Intel i7. see the first two digits, or the first digit is actually the generation. So what you can see here is this is a 10th generation. If this was a 9th generation, it would be called 9750H. And I'm not going to go through the rest of it, even though there is a formula for it. This is typically, as far as I look, the i7 or 5 or 9 and the 10th generation. Then you look at the cache. The cache itself, to remind you, is the RAM that is included, the memory that's included inside of the CPU chip. And the memory inside of the CPU chip is much, much faster than the RAM outside. And so you want as much as possible of that. So now we have 12 megahertz. The speed here is 5 gigahertz. The higher this number is, the faster the process is. And we have 6 cores. So essentially, we really have 6 CPUs in that one chip. And the more cores you have, as long as your software can use multi-core functionality. So kind of think about it as having multiple employees. And the more employees you have, the more you can break down the task and have the task done faster. And it's really that simple. So this is the processor that you have here. Let's see what other processors, what other computers are going to be like. So we're going with a G7 here. G7 has an i7. It's the same processor that I see. Let's see what a $2,000. I wonder if they have a $2,000 processor here, or computer. Yeah, they have a 2000. So let's look at the 2001. What would we have here? We actually have the same processor. We have an i7 10750, 12 megabyte of cache. So this is important. This is 12 megabytes of cache and 6 cores. So this is the same processor as we could get in a computer that had only 1200. So this essentially is the processor. This is kind of how to read what the processor is that you need, and we'll move to the next component.